Alright, welcome back guys and girls. In this tutorial video, it's going to be part one of this two-part tutorial talking to you about object placing, manipulation, and a few other things that go in there as well. So I'm going to talk to you about placing objects, resizing, raising color, or changing the color, rotating, and the arrow keys as well. So first and foremost, once you're ready to start making something within TinkerCAD, over here on the right hand side you have to choose your basic shape. Like I said before, the way TinkerCAD works, you start out with geometric shapes. You don't exactly start drawing something from scratch. It's not how it works. And I'll talk about making custom shapes later. We'll get to that. First and foremost, you can click on this and you can start with the basic shapes, text. You can do symbols, connectors, extras. We stay away from circuit assembly, so don't mess around with that. Favorites and your shape generators, we stay away from that as well. Sometimes we do get into the community shapes as well, but for now, we're just going to steer clear of that. We'll show you in a later demonstration. So let's keep it basic with basic shapes. In order to place an object, pick whatever desired object that you want. I think I'll go with a box for this demonstration. Click on it once, drag it over to the spot where you want to place it. Click once, and it will place your object in that spot. You can also replace it by clicking on it and holding. You can place it in any spot that you want to. Another way you can move your object is using the arrow keys. So if you use the arrow keys, you can move it back, forward, and back, and left, and right. And makes things, when you're trying to place them more precisely, a lot easier. Now, one thing I wanted to point out that I didn't mention before was when you select an object, a few different things happen. So first you have this dialog box on the right-hand side that pops up. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next you have kind of like this little teal or this light blue outline that shows up. These little arrows. This cone at the very top, and these little boxes, black and white. So what those all mean basically is some of them mean rotating, some of them mean moving, some of them mean raising, and that's basically in the nutshell of what they all do. So first we're going to start out by resizing an object. So in order to do that, you have to figure out exactly what you want to do. Maybe you want to make it taller, maybe you want to make it shorter or wider. So if we want to make something taller, we can click on this white box, drag it up, it makes it taller. If we want to make it smaller, it's the exact opposite. If you want to do one specific custom value, you can click on here, say we want to make it 20, type in 20, hit enter, and then it will make it that value. If you want to do the same thing for the width and the length, it's basically the exact same. So if you want to make this into 40 for a width, and our length to be maybe 25. Type in the value, click enter, or you can do it by clicking and dragging. You can also change your width and your length in unison at the same time if you click on these white boxes and move them in one specific area. You can also move stuff in unison if you want to keep it the same size and shape. Maybe you just want to shrink it. Hold down the shift button, click and drag in to make it smaller, click and drag out to make it bigger. Now notice that it all stayed pretty much uniform and the same shape. If you do not do that, notice how it doesn't really lock in place. It really goes wherever your mouse goes. Just like that. Depends on what you're going for. Sometimes you may want that, sometimes you might not. In order to raise an object up, so right now it's sitting right on top of our work plane, which is fine, but sometimes you want to raise something up or bring it down. In order to do that, this little black cone right here in the center, right at the top, click on that and hold with your mouse, drag it up to go up, and push it down to go down. Now with this as well, you can also click on that cone. Maybe you have a specific height, or maybe you want to have it hovering over top of a certain object, a certain amount. You can type that value in, hit enter, and it'll give you your desired amount. Just like that. Now also, if you want to rotate an object, you'll notice if you look at the side here, a couple different arrows pop up. One here, this side, and the bottom. So we can rotate going around this axis. If we rotate, we can rotate around, or move the screen, we can rotate around this axis as well, or we can rotate around in this direction. If you hover over top of it, it shows you exactly which direction it will rotate. So this would be kind of like the very back. This would be the side. This would be the bottom. In order to rotate something, you have to click on that small little arrow. If you move on the inside of the circle, it moves 22.5 degrees, as you can see. If you move on the outside, it moves 1 degree at a time. You can also click and type in a specific value. Let's say we want it at 45 degrees. Click and enter. It just turned at 45 degrees. And you can do that for any angle. It does not matter. Just like that. Sometimes you have to zoom out so you can see it better. So right now everything is just about at a perfect 45 degree angle. Let's change this one. Just like that. So now everything is at 45 degrees. Alright, now let's focus on, over here on the right hand side we have our dialog box. The dialog box has a few different things. Obviously we're dealing with a shape. This little key here, this button, allows you to hide or show your panel. This little kind of locking mechanism here, if you click on it, it basically locks your object in place so you cannot move it. No matter how many times you click on it, you can try to delete it, nothing happens. Sometimes you want to do that so your object stays in place, sometimes you don't. Right now we're just going to leave it unlocked. If you want to hide your object from view so you can see behind it, underneath it, or something along those lines, you can click on this little light bulb icon. It will hide your selected, or click on it again to show it. Down here we have two different things. We have our solid and our hole. For the solid, basically this just changes the color, the overall outlook. So we can change it to like maybe a violet color, a green, even a red. Depends on what you want. But just keep in mind this is all strictly for looks. Once I print these things out, whatever printing filament color I have in the 3D printer is what will print out. So even if you have like red or green or blue, it doesn't necessarily mean that I will be printing that specific color out. Just keep that in mind. And we can also change it into a hole if we want to as well. We'll talk about why that's so important and useful in another demonstration. As you move on down through, there's a few different other things that show up. So we have radius, steps, length, width, height. So radius, if we click and drag on it and just experiment here, you can notice that these corners, they start to rotate. It gives them a radius. That's kind of why this thing is called a radius tool, or radius slider. The more that you slide it, the more of a radius it turns into. If we slide it the whole way, it turns into a sphere. If we slide it the whole way to the left, it stays as a cube. This section right here where it says steps, it's not as noticeable on this design or this part, but when you have an object, maybe like a cylinder, it might be a little bit more noticeable. As you can see, there's kind of like these little lines that show up, vertical lines. If you grab this slider for the sides, pull it to the right, you'll notice that those little increments, or those little sides, they basically start to go away. So it basically creates a bunch of smaller sides within an object. We can also change the height, width, and length by dragging these sliders. Maybe you have one specific height, length, or width you want to go with, or maybe you just want to use a slider and experiment. You can also type your values in, just like we did earlier, and make it whatever you need to. Just like that. Now, just keep in mind, not all your objects that you deal with will have this same exact dialog box that you pop up. So even when we click on, like you see how we radius, steps, length, width, height, even when we have all those things on a cube, if we click on a cylinder here, we only have 3 of those that pops up. We no longer have length, width, and height. We have segments, so if we click and drag on that, kind of makes the surface quality a little bit smoother. We can bevel the edges, which basically means it kind of rounds these corners over with these edges. The sides, like I said earlier, you can kind of see how they're a little bit more defined and flatter. If we pull them to the right, it makes them smoother. Just like that. Alright, now a few other things I want to point out. Will be touched or will be covered in the following demonstrations, so stay tuned for that. So hopefully by the end of this small little demonstration and the screen capture tutorial, you'll have a better idea of how to just do a few basics like place, change the color, resize, rotate, raise your object, use those arrow keys, and just modify and manipulate your objects in some way, shape, or form.